That now.
I think. Really? What times?
God, I can't remember. Mine is, it's something. Put a plow on that, you know?
Once it's loud, it's tough to go back up on. Call this meeting, Orange Sturt City Council special meeting, tentative agenda, Wednesday, November 10th, 2021, 5:30 p.m. Council chambers. Call. Belden. Glass. Renslow.
Yes.
Kava.
Here.
Aspen.
Yeah.
The agenda approval. Any motion?
So moved.
Second by Renslow, second by Belden. How do you vote? Belden?
Yeah.
Renslow?
Yes.
Kava?
Yes.
Askren?
Yep.
Okay. 2021 tax increment financing.
TIF certificate, this is a TIF certificate we file every year with the two county to get the money to meet our obligation for all the bond issues.
And there's an allocation for blight properties in this, which has been requested, so. I'd like to thank, first of all, I'd like to thank Ash and Chip for all of the work that they've put into this. There's a lot to it. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
By Kava,
second.
second by Belden. How do you vote? Belden?
Yep.
Renslow?
Yep.
Kava?
Yes.
Askren?
Yep.
4, resolution number 2141C, setting a date for the public hearing.
Move.
Moved by Belden,
Second.
second by Kava. How do you vote? Belden?
Yes.
Renslow?
Yes.
Kava?
Yes.
Askren?
Well, Chip, this takes a bond at ballpark, it's at 3% to what?
We're expected to be close to 2%, so let's call it 2.25 maybe for now to be conservative.
Okay, 5, Black Housing Program. Are you talking on the matter, Brian?
Well, I've got the referencing to the guidelines. That you're referencing to?
So on the table, on the agenda, that's the new
Been revised.
version, yep.
To add, basically, there's gonna be an application. If anybody wants it, they're gonna fill out an application process. And an addition of sewer inspection.
I think there was an addition to wells and system. Iowa groundwater hazard wells and stuff.
How clear do we need this motion to be regarding minor blight? Do you want it clear, or do you want it? I think it probably should be, right?
You can put it in when you want.
I think it needs to be clear. Okay, so give me a minute to write one, please.
I was still gonna refer to the bond that we.
Okay. And if you guys want to add to this, I don't care. This is a quick one. But after legal counsel discussion, LMI funds can be allocated to affordable housing program. And please refer to the adopted rules. Blight is already in our urban renewal plan. So we don't have to modify the plan. These funds can be allocated from LMI to blight. And then this has a blight designation. The council has to identify what a blight property is. And you gotta probably have it inspected or all that stuff, right? Or all the steps that go with that. So you get Beverly to inspect it or,
It says that it has to be proven to be a blight property by the code enforcement officer.
there you go.
What about projects that are already in progress?
Wouldn't qualify. You mean if anything's like in process now?
Yeah.
They would have to fill out an application, go through a bonding,
Okay,
to the bonding council.
It doesn't have to go, no, that's not true. This does not have to go to the bonding council. You were on the same call I was. And he specifically said, this is in our urban renewal plan. And he specifically said that these funds that we're certifying for tonight can be allocated because it's in our urban renewal plan. So we don't need to go back to the
I
bond
think he
council.
was talking
I'm
about a
talking
bonding
about-
attorney to do the development
I
agreement.
understand, and that's not accurate.
Development agreement?
I'm
No.
talking about these guidelines that are on here. Is that,
Point.
what?
That's the rule difference between LMI.
Then we need to fix this a little bit because it says that he will refer it to the, upon approval of the city council development agreement must then be approved by the bonding. Take that sentence out, correct?
And add in there that it's based on affordability. Because each year. the
And that's in there at the very end.
That's fine, but LMI is a required calculation that has to go through, and Chip, jump in here, fine.
It's
You're
a
on
really
the call, too.
simplified process for the city,
What?
let's put it that way.
Correct.
It has its use limitations, which you alluded to, the affordability aspect.
Correct,
And if you have to be consistent with that, once you do that, then you're covered.
but the point is to reallocate your LMI requirements and funds to blight, which gives the council the flexibility to be more on the fly or fewer steps to sign those funds. So if that's in there, I missed it.
Yes, so we need to take out of number one, we need just to take that out,
Yep.
that needs to go to the bonding attorney. And then,
It doesn't need a development agreement. Matt already talked about having an application process. So
and
there you go.
then, so the 6 months starts from the acceptance of the application, correct? Just to make sure, upon
Yeah.
approval of the application from the city of Stuart, the developer has 6 months to complete the project. So it's 6 months from the acceptance of council?
I don't care.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't
just
know. What do
To
you
make
guys?
sure
Well-
it's clear.
Yeah, it says city of Stuart, you could presume that means the council.
Yeah.
You know, that's
I
what
mean, that
I would,
is the city of Stuart.
that's what I would
Yeah.
agree with you on that.
So should we say under approval of the city council, an application must be approved?
Well, it
Or
says here
something, you've already
that
got that?
they have to, it says that the developer must fill out the application and through the city's Stewart Economic Development Director. They have to provide the proof of or the owner. And the director will then present it to the council for approval.
And then strike that next sentence in here.
The
and that
next,
should be-
actually be all the next two
The
sentences.
feedback from that call was clear. If it's blight, it's in our urban renewal plan, and Chip shaking his head, he was on the call.
Right, I wasn't on the call.
It's
so I don't know.
allowing the council to have authority to solve blight and make it an affordable housing situation. These are homes that have been fixed up at $15,000 for a purchase price and sold for $160,000, okay? And if,
So we just take out those two sentences.
yeah, I mean, this is a good thing. Fewer rules and fewer guts, so let's go. What's a good
And
thing?
so on the back, number 7 says, like it did in the previous one, that it's subject to funds available and it will be no more than 10%. But it also said in the previous one that the said percentage shall be determined by the city or council during the application process, because they wanted to know beforehand.
And, maybe.
Which is fine, I just-
Maybe add a
that's-
last bullet point that the rules may be modified. You're always gonna have changes or requirements that, maybe.
That's
this
just an invitation to do it, don't you think?
I don't know.
I don't know, but you can just leave it
Yeah, I
as
think
is.
that's
If it
just
needs to be-
an invitation
if it
to
needs to be
modify.
done,
You
then
do
they
it. You
can
bring
come
it
back.
up and.
Yeah.
and you-
If you hit a bump with this, then you bring it up and fix it, do this though,
Right.
so.
I guess, do we have any houses out there right now that are supposed to be going by these guidelines?
No.
No, because they're not, even- yeah, they're not. even-
So even houses that have been started and with the same guidelines, it don't,
I don't see how you can, because we haven't put this in place yet.
okay.
But I mean, once go forward, that's up to the council to determine.
And
This is
they'll
just-
figure out the application process through Matt, and Matt will present it just like he does everything
Yeah.
else with the type stuff.
And if there's other stuff that you want to do that is LMI based or whatever, that's fine. This just gives you guys flexibility to get rid of LMI dollars through blight, which is a huge deal. And if Jim's got sewer stuff or streets, I think there's a way you could probably work through that too, you know? It doesn't all have to be blight used, but at least you got it with fewer rules. So, anyway,
The motion?
yeah, I guess.
Where did you see that
That's-
about
that's-
that,
just
those last two sentences?
Yeah.
It's on the back. Okay.
I was trying to refer, we'll refer to the.
Mike,
I don't-
I'll send you
Okay,
the
but-
Word document on this.
That's not required.
That sounds good.
And he had it on the phone.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, well, not the revised one, but he gave us that's what I'm saying. That's just legal bills. And if he's giving us home rule advantage, then the less legal expense, then the better. If you want it referred and blessed, then we can do that. So what do we want to do? Approve it and then,
Well, I mean, if he looks at it and just says, yeah, fine, then just go ahead with
but
it.
he already has this copy before the revisions that you made. And he already told us to, Chip, you were on this call too? Matt?
Yeah, I haven't seen the document, but he did say that on the call.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the same thing. There was
It
a
is
couple
the
things, just cleaning
exact
some,
same thing.
some
Yeah.
housekeeping
Yes.
things up and
Yep.
making it more consistent. And
I'll just bottom line it, you don't need him to administer it for you.
So
That'll
why don't we
save you
make,
some
I
money.
guess my motion is to adopt the rules with that motion, and we will share a copy. Him, if he has a problem, we'll email it.
So do we have a second? Yes. Second by Kaba. You vote Belvin?
Yep.
Renzo?
Yep.
Kaba?
Yes.
Askren?
Yep.
Okay, 5, TIF agreement, proposal, Dudley?
Okay, so that's what I asked for this to be on the agenda. We left that motion. And like I said, there's urgency on this one because of the business transition. So I guess we left this with Chip running or asking him to look at it from a future cash flow, TIF cash flow perspective. And you've done that.
Correct.
And you don't have issues with
It's
that.
workable, you bet.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion that we approve this agreement as presented by Dudley's, only modifying the term from 7 to 10 years. And that's been validated by our financial advisor. So that's my
Okay.
motion.
so what's the next step after this?
Give it to the bonder too.
It
He does
becomes a
development
development
agreement
agreement.
and
Yep, correct. Yep.
then, and that should be able to be done before our next meeting.
No, that's the problem with this is you get into modifying the urban renewal plan and all that crap. that we just
It'll
have to
take
do.
time, but the basic is.
But if we
It's gonna
don't,
take time.
It's 45 to 60 days.
But they can still proceed knowing that they're gonna,
that's what the point of me having
Okay.
this on the
The money
agenda.
itself will come
right?
2024.
I wanted to make sure that
Sure,
it's
It's gotta
something that
keep
they
going.
know that
Correct.
it's approved so they
Yep.
can continue and
that's what you guys need.
we don't lose
certainty.
out on this.
What you're doing now is giving them the opportunity to move.
Do you guys have questions at all?
No.
Okay.
Do we have a motion? Renzo, how do you vote? Belvin?
Yep.
Renzo?
Yep.
Kaba?
Yes.
Askren?
Yep.
7, cemetery committee, cemetery plotting survey.
We, at last meeting, we had a motion was to approve council member Calver presentation. We added to it 2 items for council member building. And somehow the whole thing got into a confusion with everybody. So tonight, we're trying to clear it for this, and put this confusion aside.
The, approving the guidelines was never meant to disband any citizen advisory committee. That was not in the guidelines that Councilmember Askren made a motion to adopt the guidelines. I guess we weren't clear enough on that in the motion. I didn't know we had to be. I figured since it wasn't in the motion that we weren't disbanding them, they were still going to be together. But if we need to clear it up, I'd like to make an amendment to that, just say any existing citizen action committees can move forward as long as they are brought into compliance with those guidelines. That way we don't have to disband anything and reappoint people.
Okay, so here's a question.
Yeah.
If one of them does,
Mhm.
then they would have to be reformed by the new set of rules, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, I mean,
Shouldn't they all just be stopped and then everybody has
No.
to reapply?
No,
I mean, so
that
here's the
that
thing,
wasn't the motion. That isn't what we,
can I have my first
Proposed.
speech, please?
Yeah, okay, good.
Can I go ahead,
Yes,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
And Mick?
go ahead, Chris.
you don't want to see me done.
Heck, Matt, she's got the floor right now.
So my interpretation from Monday was that we were disbanding all committees and then we would start with this new citizen advisory committee. That was my understanding. That was a lot of people's understanding. I don't know why we don't treat the cemetery just like we do all the rest of the departments. I mean, we want to get rid of all the drama. We want to get rid of all this other stuff. Then we treat it just like we do everything else. Allow Jim to work with Ash. He presents just like the streets do, just like sewer, parks and rec, and everything else. And if there wants to be a committee, like our boss has for the parks and rec, then that's fine, but it needs to be separate from the city. So, I mean, they can make recommendations, but ultimately Jim needs to be working with Ash on what happens with that cemetery budget, what happens with all the rest of the stuff. And we keep it nice and clean, just like everything else is. I don't know why it has to be separated out. We'll just keep it clean.
what do you mean separated out? That's what
Well, tell me how many committees are currently going that's affected by your new rules?
I think 3, you got the Parks and Rec with Barb, the pool committee,
Yeah.
and the cemetery.
And really Barb's just by herself.
But it's still a committee.
But she doesn't get to make recommendations on how to spend the budget.
She could.
Yeah,
She could.
Yeah,
Comes to Ash and says, this is our proposal. So I think needs to be the same. I mean, they can meet and they can make recommendations, but
So that's what it was supposed to do. In the current form it was. They were supposed to meet, make recommendations, and we had a situation where the committee approved a contract without bringing it to the council. So that's why these, they're not regulations, I don't want to call them regulations, these guidelines. When I asked Ash if we have any, we don't. So. Apologize, got a call. Not sure what it is.
no, it's
Nothing's going
it's a
on.
reminder page.
Reminder.
Oh. I apologize. So, we had that incident where the committee made committed the city through the contract. So that's why these guidelines were put in place. It's just to say, this is what you need to follow as a committee. It's not any different than what it was before. It's just in writing.
But ultimately, we need to make it just like all the rest, the street, the sewer, the parks and rec, and everything else. And ultimately, Jim just needs to make the decisions with Ash, and then Ash can
Then why
recommend
would you
it.
have a committee,
Well, why do you have a parks and rec committee?
you know?
They don't make recommendations.
At one time,
Jim.
there was a lot of people on that committee.
Yeah,
and
well,
they've fallen off.
and here's the thing, for a lot of years, Schwinger sprayed without submitting his bid to the council for a lot of years. I don't know how many.
So that was him mowing and spraying.
But they were two separate bids,
Okay.
right, Jim? Am I
That is
clear?
correct.
This
Okay,
was
but
two
it
separate
don't make
bids,
any
always
difference. It don't
been.
make any difference. All committees are the same. Don't make any difference if
But
it's
I'm
the
saying, I don't
cemetery,
know
the
why now
parks,
it's
the
a-
sewer, whatever.
One topic.
Whatever the committee is, it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference if it's you, if it's Jim, whoever. There is not a council member allowed, the council members are not allowed to be on the
Which is
committees, the
fine.
citizens committees, and Jim is not allowed to be on there because he is a paid, he can be on there, but, and he can give recommendations,
We can't.
but they don't have to listen to his recommendations but he can't vote. So he has nothing to do with that part of
So
it.
then-
Any paid employee.
Okay, so then everybody reapply, so
No.
that way you have more.
No, I don't see that. I
Do that. Let's-
I
we'd
think-
like to,
But I don't know why we're singling out the
The
We're
cemetery.
not.
yeah.
But
This
you
has,
are.
no, we're not.
It's like this
You
pool
are-
committee's got money
you may
still
think that,
sitting
but
around
we're
from
not.
when they put the
This
garage in.
is any committee that is out of compliance with those guidelines would have to be brought up. It's just at this time, this happens to be the cemetery committee. That's all it is. I didn't want to single out any because I knew this would happen and evidently it was going to happen anyway. But that is not the intent. This is to ensure that that we have a set of guidelines in place, that we allow committees, because we got people that are interested in being on cemetery committee and having cemetery committee.
As long as there's not a conflict.
What conflict is there?
Well,
What
I'm just
conflict?
saying. So this is gonna cause more problems. Mr. Johnson's on the committee and he profits from the cemetery, correct?
How do you profit from your
Can
cemetery? Yeah, come on.
Do you
Mike,
profit from anything?
How do I profit
Mike,
from that?
can I just have you come up?
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
So my thing is, and it's not,
I'd like
it's
to
not,
know, I'd like to know exactly how I would profit
this has
off
been
this.
brought to me and I've never said anything.
I know who it's been brought by.
I mean, it wasn't me and it
Yeah.
wasn't Mr. Henderson, if that's what you're thinking. 'cause
No,
it
I
wasn't.
know.
It was somebody
I
else.
know.
And they said that they think that you have conflicts because you run, I mean, you have your plots out there, you have.
I don't have any plots out there.
You-
You,
But
no,
you
let
put,
me, let
you
me,
put,
let me explain how.
you put stone,
Let me speak, Christina. How a cemetery works is, when I was in Paola, Kansas, first of all, I'm Mike Johnson, I'm with Johnson Family Funeral Homes. You all know me. When I was in Paola, Kansas, I took care and I sat on the board of 5 cemeteries. We don't profit one bit. I have no profit off that cemetery whatsoever. When a family comes to me, I contact the city of Stuart, which is Nadine. I say, Nadine, we have a burial coming up. If it's 11 o'clock, it's 11 o'clock. If it's noon, it's noon. We contact Nadine. She goes ahead and gets in contact with Jim. Jim goes out there and marks off the grave. We come out and we do the burial. The opening and closing, which you should know as you're on the board if you read the rules and regulations. No,
it's not a board, it's a committee.
a committee, whatever it might be. But the opening and closing goes to the city, I get nothing. The flagging fee goes to the city, I get nothing. When I put a stone in, that is only because a family comes to me to put a stone in that particular cemetery. To be honest with you, you don't know this, you don't need to know this, but I'll tell you this. I put stones in cemeteries throughout the whole state of Iowa. Last week, I was in Sioux City, put stones in. I profit nothing off those cemeteries. My only concern with this particular cemetery is, yes, my late wife is in that cemetery. I have family members in that cemetery. And you know what? I want that cemetery to look nice, well-maintained, and its best. As far as profit-wise, you know what you have done, and I'm gonna be honest with you all. Those stones were hit. I know which stones were hit. I'm not saying anybody hit them in particular, but they had been moved. I'd sent Dad out there on many occasions, costing me money. So what you've done as a cemetery is cost me money. Number one, you have cost me money over the years. Please contact us after we've already placed them there. They are placed correctly. They are signed off by. And then when we get a call saying, hey, Mr. Johnson, our stone was hit out there in the cemetery, can you go out there and put it back? Our protocol at the funeral home was to call Nadine. A lot of times, nothing would happen. The family would call back again, say, hey, Mr. Johnson, the stone still is not moved back. She would call the cemetery again, still at that point in time, nothing was done. I'm gonna go out there and fix the stone for that family. Number one, costing me money. I've been out there in the cemetery, I used my materials, I've used my manpower with volunteers. Jim was there. We went out, we set up all those stones that were damaged in the North Oak Cemetery. Materials that I supplied. Now, the concrete you supplied, but we re-leveled tons of stones. But what you've done over the years has cost me lots of money. So who's actually getting kind of, you know what, out of the whole situation has been me over the years. because I've been out there pulling stones back, resetting stones, and I can tell you, there's been subtle stones. You can look at Jim, yeah, but
Looking around.
it's
I'll look at
fine.
Jim.
But I can bring my dad up here, I can bring my mother up here, I can bring Tyler up here, and anybody that's been at the funeral home and tell you firsthand how many conversations we have had with the city over the years and how many times we've been out for particular stones. I know one we went out 5 times. I can tell you Mrs. Templeman's is sitting out there. That family is very upset. I sent Dad out to move it back, reset it. My manpower, materials, I already said it once. That's my obligation to set it and to be done with it. I went back out there 5 different times. Her niece, or yeah, it had been a niece, came back in and said, the stone is hit again. Can you put it back so it doesn't move? We put it back so it doesn't move. Now it's sitting out there. It's been hit. There's chips out of it. And she has really no family except for her niece. I seen her out there about 3 years ago, and she said, why is all this damage done to the stone? I said, because it was hit. It was put back so it didn't move, and now it's really damaged. You know, this has went on for a long time. That is one of the reasons why the cemetery board and committee was started, to limit this type of thing. When the committee got started, I tell you what, we've come a long ways, as you well know. We got a great moving guy. You know, he's done a great job. I have not had one call all summer long regarding this.
The same people, just to reiterate that, the same people that had complained to me about the maintenance in the past are now saying positive things.
Well, there's-
Oh, yeah.
There's been nothing but positive.
You know, and I'm gonna be honest with you, Christina, when somebody calls about a stone or something being awry out in the cemetery, who do you think they're gonna contact first? This guy right here, because they know I am out there on many occasions. If we've set the stone, they say, Mike, can you go out there and assess the damage and see what we have? And I usually just go out there and I look it over. If it's been moved and it's one that I've said, I've moved it back, reset it, and moseyed on about my way. So as far as getting funds from the cemetery, I'm not the one benefit. I benefit zero. You have cost me money over the years. And I will tell you, it's been thousands of dollars over these years. My diesel, because when I go out there and I start my truck up, I'm gonna be honest with you, just to start my truck, it's $550. That's insurance, that's diesel, that's manpower. That's what it takes to start that truck up before I do anything. Everything has to be calculated, no different than the EMTs. EMTs should know, when I was on that board, I said, you should know exactly to the T what it costs to start that ambulance. With your manpower, with your insurance, with the diesel fuel, you should know exactly what that cost is. And if you're running that ambulance and not knowing exactly what that cost is, that's a detriment. That's not a positive thing. No different than my business. So as far as I know who you're talking about saying conflict of interest, I'm going to be honest with you. It's like, well, let's go back to the other night, for example. I wasn't going to bring this up, but I will as we
I
speak.
just want to make sure things are clear. So
Yeah,
go
and
forward, we
that-
got this all out of the way, and then
That's
there's more
clear.
questions.
I can tell you who's benefiting off the cemetery. I get no hours in that cemetery whatsoever, period. There are people on the board that do get overtime hours on that cemetery. So we'll go, if you want to really get in depth, we'll get in
We
depth.
don't have to get there.
Okay,
I'm just saying,
okay.
I just want to make sure
Okay.
that we're all clear.
Let's go back.
Yeah,
You know, to be honest with you, we're all on the same page on this cemetery committee. We're all here for one reason and one reason only. And that is to beautify this cemetery. But when things like this come up, we have 2 bids right here. I was at that meeting. I was at the meeting prior to that. However, I had to be on the phone because I was at a doctor's appointment, and everybody knew I was at the doctor's appointment. I asked several times for that to be moved to another date. There was no urgency to that meeting whatsoever. These meetings should be run by the Roberts Rule. run by the Roberts rule, no different than
This
our
is the
wrestling.
meeting that we have with Corey.
And I'm gonna refer to that here in a minute. But us in the wrestling board, and I'm gonna bring that up for an example. That meeting is very well organized. All the minutes are ran through Messenger. They don't get sent via sometimes Messenger and sometimes email. It's been instructed, if you receive anything from the wrestling board via email in our internal group, ignore it, because all minutes are tracked right here on Messenger. I can go back through my phone to 2016 when we formed and we brought that board together with two different groups. And I tell you what, it's never ran so good. We got more kids this year than we ever had. This is the same way. But however, that particular meeting, it felt like to me, to be honest with you, that it was a coup to get rid of the mowing guy. It might have been, it might not have been. That's my opinion of the whole situation. But these two bids, to be honest with you, until today, I never seen either one of these. It was discussed in the October meeting that we had two bids, but they were gonna need to be rebid. Those would be rebid apples to apples, not oranges to apples. Then after that, it would be brought back to the November meeting. However, that did not happen. And so I got, now I've had 24 years of experience in cemetery and funeral home business.
Hey, Mike, can I interrupt you for
Yeah.
a second? And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Did you get those from Jim? Did you get those to him, those copies?
No, I got these off the supplemental packet off the
Oh, okay.
council. So no, I did not get these from Jim. These were what we were to go over in the November meeting. We all are cahoots to get the old cemetery. Excuse me just a minute. Okay. We want that old. We have people that want to be in that cemetery. So that we all want the cemetery open. We all want that ready to go. We have one in particular that her husband passed away about a year ago. I did the services. However, we have not done the burial yet because we cannot go out there and bury. That's obvious. The cemetery back there is not marked off. Going back to who profits off the cemetery, I do not, because I spent 48 hours out there trying to find the corner workers out there. One, for us as a group. Number two, my late wife. She wanted to be buried in that cemetery. I had permission to go to that cemetery. We have not been able to properly survey the cemetery. It would not be kosher for me to be able to go out there and no one else. That's why our stone is not in the old cemetery. I was not going to do that. It's not marked off. If we would have put that out there and then we found out later that we weren't in specs, we would have to move. And I wasn't going to risk that. So now we're in what we call the South Cemetery or the new cemetery. But again, these two bids, there's 5 of us on that committee. I never seen these before. Now you've seen them, Jim's seen them. We were explained a little bit about them in the October meeting. Again, those were supposed to come back to us in the November meeting. I looked these bids over and I don't even know what these are for, because here's the maps that I got from the Google images, and I'll hand these out to everybody. Here's the maps. Here's the old cemetery. This is the full cemetery. And I don't know if I-
Thank you, Chip.
Thanks, Chip.
Thanks.
See you, Chip.
You safe?
Here's the old cemetery. This is North Oak Grove. So where I've drawn this line is the area in question. So I've kind of mapped everything out, northwest, east, south. What we need to do is we need this whole area surveyed and marked off. Not just one area, which I think probably is what this is here, because there's no way you could actually lay out this whole area for $11,000. This one here is $1,800 per hour. that includes,
No, it's not.
it is, I spoke with him today.
You did?
Yeah, I did.
That's not the way he presented that.
This
Well, the wording's kind of,
right here, Jim, if you look at it, and I spent, to matter of fact, I spent 45 minutes on the phone with Sean today. Right here, it was engineer, landscaping architect, land supervisor, and so forth and so forth. Principal 2 would be the engineer. He charges $220 an hour. Principal 1 is a landscape architect. He charges $209 an hour. So you go down this list all the way down to number 1. Number 1 is the low man on the totem pole, and that's the graphic designer at $99 an hour. That adds up to be just shy of $1,800 an hour. So if when I spoke with Sean, he said, given was a general scope. He said, however, I have never done a marking in the cemetery before, ever. He said, our group has never done it before. And I said, well, that's a problem, Sean. And I said, so were you given a map? And he said, no, I was not. I said, okay. I said, that's a problem. And so I'm going to be honest with you, in my recommendation, I want to get this done too, but also at the same time, I'm a business guy and I'm also a taxpayer in town. And I want to make sure it's done right the first time. I don't want to have to go back and do it again. I don't want to do things again in my business because obviously I can't go back and do it again. It's got to be done right the very first time. So, I think really, however, the best way around this is to get together with these gentlemen. I tried to call Forrest Aldridge. Is that his name?
Yeah.
I tried to call Forrest's office. He wasn't in, so I wasn't able to speak with him because I wanted to find out exactly what his scope was. I'm not sure where that area is because if you look at the map, this area right here is completely open. I did go out there and I witched that area. That is when I found out that there is no one in that area because I was told when I first got back, I got home in 2007. I operated funeral homes in Kansas and Missouri prior to coming back here. And those were the cemeteries I was on. But nevertheless, when I came back here, I was told that we could not, the only people that could actually operate in this cemetery were people that already had existing lots because we didn't know where Cottersville was. That's easy to find because I can witch for bodies. I witched this whole entire area. There's no one there. I came back here. There's no one there. I came over here, spent hours. There's no one there. And over here, there's no one there. And the property line actually goes on beyond these trees as well, if you look at the original map. So there's a lot of area there. And then that's when I came to the committee and said, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to go into that cemetery. Instead of buying new land right away, we should utilize the land that we already have, saving taxpayers money, including myself, because I'm a taxpayer in town. I want to try to save as much money and utilize area that we already have because there's nobody there. And I did witch that whole area, but you have burial spots, this whole area right here on the lower side, that is completely empty. It can be buried. It is on a hill, but a hillside is one of the best burial areas that you can possibly get on. Everything sheds off that.
So can I interrupt you
Yeah.
again? And I appreciate you bringing that up. I wasn't expecting to go that far because we were talking about, do we have to disband and reappoint people? We got at least 3 people, on the cemetery committee that meet the guidelines. And when I made these guidelines and presented them to the council, I didn't know I had to make it specific that it can be for existing and then just move on. I took that because Jim was going to take that stuff back to you,
Yeah.
So I had no idea it was going to be disbanded until I started getting a call. It's like, that was not my intent.
Sure.
I mean, if we decide we want to disband them all, why don't we could just reappoint them all tonight too? But it doesn't make sense to do that.
that wasn't the intent.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
it wasn't the intent.
So that just needs to be added.
Well, that's what I asked. Actually, I said that we
Should have that on record.
we amend it to say that any existing committee can move forward as long as it's brought into compliance with those guidelines.
That's it.
Could I
Okay,
speak
so that's a
one
motion.
thing so I can sit down? Come back to this here. My recommendation is there was 3 of us that I, and none of the 3 had received any of these bids. Again, we touched briefly in the October meeting on that, but none of us had actually received these bids and accurately been able to go through them. I think we all need to be included in on that to be able to make sure things are done correctly.
Is that work even gonna be done this year, can be done this year or not?
This really, I spoke to Snyder, and he said, there's absolutely no way. You know, to be honest with you, we're pretty much done setting monuments. There's a few left that we're gonna set,
So
but then winter's gonna be here, it's gonna be froze, the snow's on the ground. You're not gonna be able to do that until spring anyhow. So there's no point of getting in a rush to do that, because again, 3 of us weren't privileged to that information. Now,
Till December?
I do want to, because on Monday's meeting, you did mention that those were actually sent out, they were not.
So I can clarify. Beaster and Kim's bid was given out August. We got it beginning of August.
But
So
that never came to us.
yes, we sat in here and we passed it around. August, we talked about it in September, then we talked about it again in October. We passed around Snyder's bid in October because Jim said in October, these bids are so far apart, we need to figure out why. So I know they went to everybody.
Well, I
As we were
will
saying,
say.
there was copies handed out, I can't clarify
They
that
weren't
because I don't
handed
know, but I know that they were sitting on the table because I have a copy of B and K's bid in our cemetery book.
Exactly, and at that meeting, Jim opened up his folder and he said, I have 2 bids. Now, they're apples and oranges. So we are going to have to get them closer together and have them rebid this on the scope that is provided. I don't even know what the scope is that was provided. This is the scope and the map, that's the scope that we need to have provided. And the only way you're gonna get that is if you actually have them come out and you walk the area so they know exactly to the T what they're doing. That way we can establish an exact cost, because if this is only for that far section, that does us no good. Get them out here one time, one price, and be done with it, instead of getting them out here several different times. That doesn't make sense. So in my recommendation, that needs to be tabled.
Okay, so
Which
we'll
is
get to
fine,
that.
which is
We'll get to
fine.
that.
We
Because
can
right
table that.
now, we're just trying to clear
Table
the
that one,
motion.
But here's, I want to add one more thing before we finish. So we did a lot of talking about what the mayor can and can't do and what the council can and can't do according to appointments. And so I pulled the city code today, Stuart City Code right here, Code of Stuart, City of Code of Ordinances, Stuart, Iowa. The mayor, he appoints mayor pro tem.
I understand
Library
that, I
trustee.
understand that.
No,
That
I'm
was
sorry.
state code I was
I'm
reading to
sorry,
you.
can I finish? Historical Preservation Commission, Police Chief, Zoning Board of Adjustment, and a building official. The city council, however, appoints a city administrator, a city attorney, planning and zoning commissioner, and the zoning and building administrator. It says nowhere where we get to appoint other committees. So we need to get that clarification, because it's not. in our-
There's a lot of things
I
that
don't
the
think
council and the
it's-
mayor do that are not in city
I
code. City code is
understand
meant for
So,
baseline.
so
I'm
then
just
with that being
saying.
said, Mr. Mayor, you'd have to get a clarification on employee liaisons like you did.
Correct.
But I don't think that's
That's not
necessary.
the point.
You know, it's, to me, it's a delay tactic to try to say, we don't want this to happen. We don't want our citizens.
I don't think you have to delay anything, you're
No,
just
I'm
trying to get
not,
clarification.
because I don't care if I'm on the board and have a voting, I don't care, that makes no difference. to
And
me.
what she said is
My
exactly what
my concern
Ryan
is-
Morrison said too.
My concern is that Jim oversees that cemetery, and he needs to have say in that cemetery. That is my concern.
Where
Which
does
you will
it,
continue to.
it says the
continue to.
cemetery committee is the government. Yes, it does.
Not in
Yes,
there's
it-
no,
no,
nothing in city code.
On their website, prior council says that the cemetery committee is the governing authority of the cemetery. City council approved it. They had to have. I wasn't here when it was approved,
Okay,
but that's
and
what it
I
says.
was, and yes, we approved it as a committee, not a board, and to put a board together, you put that in city code, so we can
We
sit
don't
here.
need-
And apparently
I'm
somebody
not
was
done.
that because it was in Beverly
Hold
Hills.
on, I'm not done. And we could sit here and vote to eliminate that as well. That's not the point. The point was to adopt your rules. There was some questions that needed to be answered. That was one of them. So it's just a simple adjustment to let citizens still be active. That doesn't mean that Jim's not going to be active as
Right,
well.
yeah, that's, I guess that's my thing, is there's nothing saying he can't be active, he can't be
Right.
active.
No, he
And
can
that's just
go to
one.
meetings and he can make recommendations,
And it's no
period.
different than the Aquatic Center Committee.
Period. That's right.
So we're beating a dead horse.
Oh,
I know
There's
we
nothing, so
I know
really
we
the
are.
committee can
We're
meet,
voting
and they
on
can
it.
do whatever, there's nothing to vote on, they can
Yeah,
make recommendations.
there was a gap in the.
But ultimately, it's
rules.
they're gonna have to
They're gonna have
meet
to
with
bring
Jim,
it to the
and they're gonna
council.
have to bring it to
They don't
action.
have to meet with Jim.
But then you're taking it away from Jim. He needs to have a part in it. That's what I'm so concerned about. Like I said, I don't care if I have a part in it or not. It's Jim.
He's still on
You're
the
not,
committee. With this vote,
he can be on the committee, he just has no jurisdiction over it whatsoever.
He just doesn't vote, but he's on the committee. As far as I understand.
I want to hear what Jim has to say, just a second.
My only comment is, irregardless, operation of the cemetery falls under the purview of the city of Stuart, which it still falls under Public Works. Plain and simple. So the operation of the cemetery still falls with us.
When you dig a grave, it's your liability.
The
You gotta make
maintenance-
sure,
The maintenance, the grave
Mapped
openings, that type of stuff still falls under the city of Stuart's umbrella, which falls under Public Works.
Right, and you would still do that, right? You would
Yes,
still do that.
Yes,
But if the committee came with recommendations and the council approved it, I'm not saying it would, but I mean, we're not, I guess I don't know what we're trying to take away from you, you know?
Well, you're not giving him a say.
Yes, we just said he could have input into it.
Recommend.
So you're saying he can sit there and he can recommend, but what happens when his viewpoint or whatever, he makes a recommendation, we're gonna sit there and we're gonna listen to both sides. We're gonna listen to whatever Jim recommends or
No.
puts in, and we're gonna listen to them.
If that's needed. I mean,
Yeah,
that's democracy.
or if he goes to a committee
So why would there
meeting,
be,
I think the way that
I think we're making this too difficult.
I think we are too.
is there's no council member that's supposed to be on the citizens committee, and there's no paid city employee supposed to be on the citizens committee either. The paid city employee could be at the meeting, and he could make, but the city or the citizens committee did not have to accept those recommendations. So he has to take his recommendations to the citizens committee first. And then the committee would bring that to the council.
And then,
Now, that's the way it reads.
and if there's an issue, then it'd be up to the council to resolve.
I am 100% on that page.
Yeah.
So without more
A
difficult
lot
discussion
more difficult than what
No,
it should
that's
be.
what it is now,
Well, it's
with
not.
the adjustment.
Okay, you made the adjustment. To me, I think we should vote on it to amend those rules so it's documented. If that's
Because there was
okay.
a complete, I mean, four of us thought one thing.
Yeah,
two others
I
thought
thought
something.
I took it as,
And I understand
Yes,
that now,
that's why we fix
that's
it.
correct. So I would like to
He's
vote
gonna
on
read
that.
the
so it's
motion
done.
again.
and I just didn't
Okay.
know I needed to put that in there.
No, that's
It is a
fine.
motion.
Nothing wrong with that.
We're gonna read the motion again.
It would be, any existing committees can move forward as long as they meet guidelines and compliance with.
As,
Okay.
as they are brought, as long as they are in compliance
Yeah.
with these guidelines.
Yes.
They're brought into compliance.
That's it. Moved by who? By
Me.
Calba,
Moved
moved by Estes.
by Askren, second by
Second.
Kavah. Okay, how you vote? Belvin,
Yes.
Renzo,
No,
Kavah,
Yes,
Askren.
Yes.
Okay, and as far as the plotting survey, we're tabling that
Correct.
I guess.
Okay.
Till December.
Because when I-
till December.
Till
On
December.
that topic, when I talked to Snyder, I talked to Jeff Gunn, he's the guy that the utility's been working with. When I got that email, and he said, yes, he said that price is, he did not say hourly, and he told me that they had done a site survey. They had been on site. And apparently that's not the case.
No.
B&K's guy was there because I met him there. And that bid includes the whole east side, north. Well, we'll just rebid the whole thing. If we're not gonna do it till spring, why don't we just actually have the committee meet with each surveying company on site, would be my recommendation. And then have bids due by like February 1st. That way you can move forward, you've got two apples to apples bids. And then they can move into it before, or just as the weather breaks.
I guess
Does that-
I want to end this discussion and
Does that make
compliment
sense to you
the
guys?
people that have been on the cemetery committee. There's been complaints about all of whatever. And so the cemetery committee has been good. There's been guidelines put in place. You guys have done a lot of volunteer work and that's great. And also the mowing quality has been better. So there's been positives, even though there's some bumps, it's been positive.
I've
The aquatic center committee was positive.
No, I do have one.
And Mike and Jim, can you verify from the assessor where the lot line is next to Alberta's property?
That will be part of your survey.
That would be part of the survey. I did find the main stake that marks off all the cemetery out there. So it's uncovered, it's still uncovered, it's.
It has the engineer stamp on the top of the pin.
I don't know about that.
Okay, well, that,
I wouldn't know who the.
How many lots are in South cemetery that are still open?
The south cemetery that's still open? Probably,
Without the cemetery program.
What's that?
Without. a
Mike bought them all up, there ain't any left.
No, but seriously, is there 5? Is there 50? Is there?
It's hard to say.
yeah, I would estimate 300.
I would say
Oh,
3 at least.
That's my estimation.
There's 300 there, and I would estimate
I would say there'd be 750 to 800
to 1,000.
in that north section. We're still gonna have to put access through there.
Yeah.
Especially for,
For the roads.
That's
yeah.
just small things.
Because that's definitely.
So
And there is
first
a
of all,
road,
for
and I
everybody,
hit a road that
Information,
comes
there are
from this
complaint
way.
forms on
Goes
the
east,
website
west.
for the cemetery.
But there's nothing
As
showing
in,
branch
like, if
either
you
way.
have a stone knocked over or you have a complaint of some sort, I think it's submitted through the thing, and I think they go to Nikki. Second of all, I would ask, so we don't have another fiasco like Monday, that if we have an issue with something, that we go and talk to the department head instead of making accusations that aren't completely true in front of the public, and then it blowing up.
Yes, thank you. Okay, public forum, anybody have anything?
Yeah, I do. What are we doing with Bobby Lumpkin's place?
It's in the process of.
Of what?
A lawyer is involved in victim. And once that's done, the city will have to see what they leave, and then we'll have to clean it up.
When is this
Okay, what
eviction
about,
process
what,
happening?
I'm not thinking, huh?
When is the eviction process happening? Because it's not filed yet. It's not filed with the state court yet. So, I'm curious, because I've been over, I have friends in that neighborhood, and I've seen them over there a few
Fisher
times,
said
but,
they gave him a notice. And
yeah, they gave a notice, they have not started
All
any
this
state
stuff-
court action to make
All
it
this
final.
stuff just falls back on him. I used to be a lot more active on this.
Yeah.
All
But
this
what I'm
stuff-
trying to eliminate is us going in with so much cost. If Brian can pay the lawyer cost to evict him, and then hopefully there
Which
won't
he
be.
should, but,
Junk.
but he hasn't filed the
With
end game where he
with
has to
COVID
actually
rules,
kick him out.
can you evict people right now?
Yes, you can, but I'm saying he hasn't filed the 3A FED with the court, that gives him to have the sheriff go in and then remove them. That has not been filed, so until that's done,
When you said Brian, did you mean the owner of the property?
Yeah, Brian Fitch and Mumford's rent.
Okay.
So,
What about the house, over here on Division Street? I mean, there's just thousands of toys up.
Well, Jim and
Junk
Corey's
all over the
already
place.
cleaned it up once in
Who?
back. Jim and Corey
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
cleaned it up. The toys, legally, you cannot take toys.
That is correct. I was informed by Police Chief Rehop, you cannot take any toys, any bikes,
Yeah.
anything like that,
But they come up missing, they just come up missing.
Well,
because
but
when we
it's just
cleaned
as
it up,
bad
we
as
went
the
and
house
skid
on
loaded a
South
dump
Main.
truck.
I didn't say that either.
but no, they've got a bill against them, and we officially cleaned them on the street once.
Nope. If it's a kid's toy, we cannot take it.
Okay, do we have anybody else besides Andy Flowers that we're looking at with, that we've given extensions to and stuff like that for projects.
We've given extensions to a lot of people when they come to the council and said, I can't clean up my property this month. Can we have an extension for another month? Andy's had started in 2000.
Started in 2018, and we haven't done anything about it,
Who's
so
that?
I don't need to say it right now.
There's two for Kingdom Properties that haven't been cleaned. Well, the one, I see the dirt's finally moved, but his house on South Gaines is just as bad as the one on North Division.
Yeah, it's on the list. On Game South. Game.
Yep.
Okay. I want to ask that, I want to go back to the FED. Is there any way to check with Beverly about having that FED file
The who?
on Mumford? There's no, she stated that a certain individual has not followed through with filing the FED.
She's been pulled back,
Yeah.
pushed ahead, pulled
But
back.
she shouldn't be the one,
pushed
she's not the one filing the FED. Brian, the owner should
Oh,
be
okay.
filing.
I don't know that process. I don't know.
She is on the top.
Why don't we all just go right now?
No,
Where we all push on one corner.
Where we going?
not without a police officer.
Where we going?
Well, I wouldn't need a lawnmower, so get one down from the tree, it's no way good. You see the lawnmower in the tree?
I'll check with Beverly tomorrow.
Yeah.
They said it's 5. She says it isn't. My email said.
No, because
They gave-
every time they tell me it's filed, I go and look and it's not
It
filed.
shows up on the county website whether or not it's been filed. It shows up.
What is the feedback on?
Thank you.
What?
Well,
There's nothing to
I
run
got
around
an
back and
email
forth.
on that too.
No progress.
Edwards.
They're up there all the time working on it.
Here. Right here.
That went to the.
Oh, is that what she,
Yeah.
that's what I'm.
So why don't we ask the zoning guy, what's his name, Jason?
Jason, man.
Yeah, because, I mean. Yeah. Yeah.
Not was supposed to take care of that.
Seriously.
Anybody else have anything?
Hold on, I'm looking here.
Oh, you should.
Okay.
Did anybody
It has
check
not
on,
been filed. I just looked.
Thank you.
did anybody check on the ditch out there in front of Burger King? Where you come across the bridge and you're headed north?
The trees?
Ditch on the left-hand side, yeah.
Well, Jim says you can get your skid loader in so far.
That ditch technically is the,
Whose is it?
it is the property owners to maintain.
I
Part of
know,
that,
that's what I thought.
part of that still belongs to Burger King and part of it belongs to Casey's.
Oh, okay.
And I took the skid loader out there with a brush hog and I mowed everything that I could possibly safely get to.
Well, why don't we think about, want to get one of those, track hose with the mower on it, rent that sucker and charge them for it.
Yes, lean them up, hire somebody to do it, and then lean them up, file lien against them for that.
And it's a nuisance. They're
Yeah,
not taking care of it.
That's what I'm
Let's
saying,
take it.
yep, yep. Done with it. And that Burger King thing's dead anyway.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, they got them on a backhoe.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
big thing, yeah, you put them on the back.
You got one.
Ryan?
Yeah.
Have fun in Colorado.
I just want to let you know.